Welcome to this afternoon's information session on the new Colombo Plan. My name's Faith Valencia Forrester, and I'll be guiding us through our session today. But we've got four fantastic guests who can give us a variety of insights into the new Colombo Plan, which this is timely. It's coming up the deadline shortly. Quick housekeeping though, we're recording the session as you just heard. So we'll share the recording with all of the people who've registered afterwards. So please use the chat function for questions throughout the presentation, and then we'll address these during our Q&A session after the panel discussion. Before we begin, I'd like to just take a moment to acknowledge that while we're joining from various lands around Australia, I'm actually joining today from Kabi Kabi country here on the Sunshine Coast. And I would like to pay my respects to elders past, present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who might be joining us today. I want to just share a quick reflection. I was at an Engaged Australia conference last week, and I was speaking to a wonderful lady. We were talking about food science, and it turned out that it was a lady who runs My Dilly Bag up here on the Sunshine Coast, and it's all First Peoples traditional foods and cooking. And so that was quite timely. So I'm just remembering that interaction, and I plan on going this weekend. So if you've got anywhere that has First Nations foods, I can highly recommend the lemon myrtle is amazing. Anyway, today's session is perfectly timed with application for the 2025 New Colombo Plan Scholarship and Mobility Program opening in August. You're here at exactly the right moment to understand how this transformative program can shape your academic and professional journey. The New Colombo Plan represents one of Australia's most significant investments in building deeper relationships across the Indo-Pacific region. And since its establishment, it has enabled thousands of Australian undergraduate students to gain invaluable international experience through study, internships, and language training opportunities. Today, we'll hear from four distinct perspectives: policy leadership from the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, program management expertise from the education sector, and crucially, and most important, the lived experience of past participants who can speak to the real-world impact of NCP engagement. So, without further ado, let me introduce you to our first speaker. Joshua House is the Director of the New Colombo Plan Secretariat at the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. He brings a wealth of international experience to his role, having served overseas in Austria and the Philippines. His career at DFAT has spanned multiple critical areas, including the Office of the Pacific, Office of Southeast Asia, and multilateral human rights issues. Prior to DFAT, he worked at the Department of Climate Change. He also served Ministers for Climate Change and Environment, Heritage and the Arts. Josh holds a bachelor's degree from the Australian National University, and as Director overseeing the NCP Secretariat, Josh is uniquely positioned to provide us with insights into the strategic vision behind the program, how it aligns with Australia's broader Indo-Pacific engagement priorities, but more importantly, what we need to know to put in our NCP applications when they open up in August. Josh, you have a presentation, so I'll hand over to you and I'll start sharing my screen.
Great, thanks Faith, and good afternoon everyone. I hope you're all well. I was saying to Faith just before we got started, this presentation comes at really a terrific time. The Foreign Minister just put out a press release 30 minutes ago announcing the second phase of the program, which has a range of reforms built into it. With apologies, I wasn't sure if that presentation was going to be out before my presentation, but so I'm speaking, or the slides will kind of have detail in there around the program settings as they are today. But there are some additional changes for 2026 that I'm happy to speak to in the room this afternoon. So as Faith was just outlining, the NCP provides opportunities for Australian undergraduate university students to develop their Indo-Pacific capability and Asia literacy through immersive structured learning and internships in the Indo-Pacific region. The intended outcomes of the NCP are for participants to acquire Indo-Pacific capability and Asia literacy, to foster deeper people-to-people and education relationships between Australia and the Indo-Pacific, and to increase Australia's economic engagement with the region by supporting NCP participants to build job-ready skills and supporting NCP alumni to maintain their ties to the Indo-Pacific. Since the inception of the program in 2014, the NCP has supported more than 55,000 Australians to undertake study, language training, and internships across the Indo-Pacific. The NCP consists of 2 programs, but now we can say 3 programs: the scholarships program, the new semester program from 2026, and the mobility program. 219 Australian undergraduate students from 33 universities across Australia were offered scholarships for 2025, and that's in line with the government's commitment to increase the number of scholars to 300 in 2026 and up to 500 by 2028. So we're really seeing a huge scale up in the longer term scholarships program. For the NCP Mobility Program, in 2025, just over 4,000 student grants were offered to 40 Australian universities for projects in 30 locations across the region. Around 40% of those projects were semester-length experiences, and from 2026, we're looking to fund up to 1,200 student grants in the semester-length program. Faith, the next slide, please. The NCP actively supports work-integrated learning by funding opportunities for Australian undergraduates to gain practical experience in the region. The scholarship program provides opportunities for undergraduates to undertake language training, study and internships in the region for up to 19 months. NCP scholars come from a wide range of fields, including business, technology, science, law, health, and engineering. And that diversity allows for tailored work-integrated learning experiences that align with students' academic and career goals. Funding for scholarships covers travel and establishment allowance, monthly stipend, and tuition for language training fees and travel insurance. The new semester program will provide grant funding to universities to support 1 to 2 length experiences in the region for credit-bearing activities, whether that's formal study or internships or other work-integrated learning experiences. And then the mobility program offers the opportunity for universities to design programs to support Australian undergraduates to undertake study, language training, internships, placements, and research across the region. The NCP Mobility Program currently offers funding for projects between 4 weeks and 2 semesters. Individual grant amounts vary from $4,000 to $20,000 depending on the duration and type of experience. Next slide. Thanks, Faith. So just to go into a bit more detail about the scholarship program, so that's to offer longer term opportunities that include study at host institutions, internships or mentorships, and language training. Internships are a core component of the scholarship experience, helping scholars to develop cross-cultural competencies and professional networks in the region. So since 2024, the NCP has supported engagement with over 2,500 host institutions, including universities, businesses, NGOs, foreign governments, and international organisations. The mobility program, as I outlined before, provides funding to Australian universities to enable students to participate in credit-bearing activities, including internships or mentorships, practicums, and clinical placements. These activities are designed to be work-integrated, meaning students gain hands-on experience in professional settings that align with their academic studies. There are a number of great examples of NCP mobility projects that include work-integrated learning, from nursing practicums in the Pacific to engineering students working on hydrogen energy in Japan. Recently, the NCP supported ANU students to undertake 6-week internships with Cambodian NGOs as part of a legal clinic. As part of that program, students spent 4 weeks in country engaging in legal research, clinical practice, and legal aid work under supervision. The next slide, Faith. Thanks. So the NCP is now 11 years old and has an ongoing budget appropriation of $50.9 million per year over the next 4 years. So it's a very well-resourced program, and there's an ongoing government commitment to that program. Scholarships have a maximum funding available of $107,000 per scholar. The value depends on a number of months and components a scholar undertakes, and currently averages about $65,000 per scholar. Funding offered under the mobility program, while not capped at a per student value, is designed as a co-contribution to university arrangements, and the average student grant was $5,500 this year, or $5,700. And so, as I touched on before, we've just had a range of reforms announced by the Foreign Minister. So, what the Foreign Minister really wants to get out of the program going forward is ensuring that it continues to lift Australia's Indo-Pacific capability. And she sees that very much happening through supporting longer term, more immersive experiences for students. And as I mentioned before, a big part of that is increasing the number of scholarships on offer, with about 300 expected to be offered in 2026 and up to 500 by 2028. We're also going to see, obviously, much greater emphasis on semester length programs, whether that's through formal study or credit bearing activities. And we're expecting to open the 2026 rounds in August, and we'll have more to say soon. So thank you.
Thanks, Josh. I just have a quick question.
Mhm.
Is it just undergraduate or can postgraduate students take advantage of NCP plan just under the new program that's been announced?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, Faith. So no, it will remain only for undergraduate students.
Damn, I was thinking, ooh, language training. I
No,
could maybe re-enroll.
we've got a very tight budget appropriation, and it's limited to undergraduate students. So,
Well, it's still a
thanks.
great opportunity.
Oh, it's a
Um,
fantastic opportunity.
so I know you've spoken about some of the outcomes and some of the programs. What
Mhm.
does DFAT see as the most significant outcome from the program since its inception?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'd have to say it's really looking at, if you look at alumni from the program, so we've had over 55,000 participants now in those first 11 years, which is, just such a, tremendous number of students over that period of time. And looking at where, the NCP experience has got them now. The NCP for many people was their first engagement with the region. It's really quite inspiring to see just how many people have, gone back to the region and continue to work there, continue to study the languages of the region, and just have that professional connection that the program was established at the outset to do. And it's been really heartening to see over those 11 years a lot of that come to fruition.
Do you have an alumni program for NCP recipients?
Yeah, we do have a pretty active alumni network. I'd encourage people after their NCP experience to join our LinkedIn group. That's our primary method for contacting alumni, and we promote opportunities that are available to alumni through that method. And I think we've got about 9,000 members
Wow.
of that closed alumni group. So it's really active. Really a lot of activity happens there, and I'd encourage people to join after their program.
How has the program evolved to address contemporary challenges like sustainability, digital connectivity in the region?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the program to date has really been quite responsive to priorities from universities. So at the end of the day, it's a demand-driven program, and so if a university seek an opportunity, say for instance, in digital economy, then they'll use the program to seize that opportunity through the grant funding that's available. I'd have to say the program's, it has changed quite a bit over those 11 years. And certainly with what the Foreign Minister's announced today and going forward, the program's going to have even more of a tight focus around delivering things in line with the Southeast Asia Economic Strategy and the India Economic Roadmap. So when the guidelines are published, there'll be a lot more detail there for people to see. But there's going to be a very clear link in the program from 2026 onwards between what our regional economic priorities are and how we're going to be prioritising successful applications.
That's a good point that you're bringing me to, because one of my questions is what qualities should students, what qualities or experiences should students highlight in their applications to give them the strongest chance of being successful, or the institutions putting the applications together? What do they really need to highlight for the next round?
Yeah, so again, it will be in the guidelines. There'll be very clear selection criteria, but for individual students applying for scholarships, I think about it in terms of resiliency, drive, and determination. So we really want to see, in an application, the ability for a scholar to, to really seize the opportunities that are there under that scholarship program. So we want to see people, undertaking longer term immersive programs that involve, study, language, and an internship. That's really what we're wanting to see out of the program. For institutional applications, it's not dissimilar. We definitely want to see, links between an activity that's proposed and Australia's economic strategies in the region. I would encourage people to look at, the invested, the Southeast Asia economic strategy, and the India economic roadmap for inspiration for how certainly government is thinking about economic challenges and opportunities in the region, because that will be flowing through to how we're going to be assessing NCP applications for 2026.
Okay, Josh, thank you very much. If anybody has questions for Josh, please put them in the chat. I'm just going to move quickly to our next presenter. Eliza Wilston brings the operational perspective that transforms policy into practice. So please welcome Eliza. She is the University Partnerships Manager at Challenges Abroad. She's also an international education professional with extensive experience in learning abroad program management, student life, and university partnerships across Australia and the Asia Pacific. What makes her perspective particularly valuable is she speaks from both sides of the new Colombo Plan experience. She was once a participant undertaking an NCP experience. Is that going back that 11 years, Eliza?
That's a little too long ago, Faith.
And that was in Japan, and she now supports the development and delivery of NCP-funded projects. Over to you, Eliza.
Awesome, thank you. I will just share my screen. I have a few slides for everyone. Okay. Awesome. I'm hoping everyone can see my slides. I'm going to be touching on some of these NCP opportunities and specifically how they can align with WIL experiences for students and cultural immersion experience for students. So touching on what makes a successful mobility program and a WIL program, one of our programs in action, which is NCP funded, how this comes together and what we can learn from this. So Challenges Abroad is a social enterprise that works with Australian universities to create these high impact experiences for students. So these are a few points that I'm going to be touching on today. Firstly, in terms of what I think makes a successful mobility and WIL program, NCP aside, is taking a moment to step back and think about what can we learn with each other, what can we be learning from each other, and what can we learn about each other. At its core, global mobility and these WIL kinds of opportunities for students, they're certainly not about tasks completed. They're not about logging a certain amount of hours. It's about students having the opportunity to build relationships in the country that they're living and working in. It's about creating opportunities for reflection, and it's also about reciprocity between the students, the institution, and the in-country communities, the institutions in country that they're working with. So I think when students are in country and engaging meaningfully, they're not just learning about how to work, they're also learning about how to listen, how to collaborate across cultures, and ultimately and hopefully how to see the world differently, which will really shape their experience coming back home to Australia, and then continuing on as part of something wider within the Indo-Pacific region as well. I think making sure that the programs are community-led by design, but also include every single stakeholder possible in terms of engagement, whether that be your university is building another university in India, so creating that connection. It's also about creating connections with in-country communities, student needs, and specific academic timelines as well to ensure it's kind of successful on all fronts. Then coming back to that strategic alignment, making sure that programs are then designed to meet those institutional needs and institutional learning goals. Having that backing will be really important in making sure the program is a success. And then something I think is a little bit forgotten is that making sure students are prepared for these types of programs. So the programs don't start when students arrive in country. The programs start in the months and months in the lead up when they're learning about culture shock, and that's a very normal part of their experience. Similarly, upon re-entry, creating those opportunities for reflection as part of the experiences that students have had will shape that depth of their learning experience and create long-term impact as well. Jumping to one of our upcoming programs in Cambodia, I'm very excited about this one. It's an oral and allied health program in Battambang and Phnom Penh with one of our partner universities coming up in November. So just to quickly touch upon what these programs look like in practice through work integrated learning, there will be knowledge exchange with local students. There'll be Khmer language training and cultural activities, of course. And this will then tie into students having the opportunity to engage and work at a community setting, running health promotion and prevention workshops, and also within their means, providing some level of service delivery as well in line with the community needs. A key reason why this program, I think, is successful and will continue to be successful is that it's building on existing relationships through the development of MOUs. It's demonstrating a responsiveness to local needs. It's linked to university curriculum, so of course students are going to be getting a level of academic credit, and on a larger scale, the opportunities within the program will allow students to connect their hands-on learning within that larger geopolitical sphere as well. Now, how this can potentially connect to NCP, I think, of course, as Joshua touched on, there needs to be clear alignment to the guidelines, and perhaps this is a question for Joshua during the question time. But again, making sure that you're considering how the program strengthens Australia's engagement and economic engagement in the Indo-Pacific through partnerships, through leadership, through cultural exchange. I also think a key part of it is where academics meets cultural competency. So from my perspective, a strong application will clearly link the academic learning with meaningful engagement in the community. Again, it's not just ticking off specific study requirements. It's about demonstrating how students can apply their discipline-specific skills in a different cross-cultural setting and how this can be enhanced, how the program will be enhanced through cultural immersion and this cross-cultural people-to-people engagement and collaboration as well. And of course, having strong long-term in-country partnerships, these programs need to be built on a sense of continuity and a long-term focus. I think without having that, you're not going to be building a sense of trust with these people-to-people connections, and that long-term focus is required, to make sure that the program can continue in the long term and it's not just a fly-in, fly-out kind of model. And finally, what can we learn from this? WIL is not just about work. It's about contributions, it's about curiosity, and it's about connection. I think learning abroad and immersion experiences create meaning for students coming back to Australia to consider what's next for them. I think I'm an example of that in terms of my next steps and international pathway post my NCP experience. And it also creates an opportunity for students to ask a so what and a what's next. For me, in my space, in my sphere, and in the wider geopolitical region in the Indo-Pacific as well. I think student support, again, from start to finish and beyond is really critical. That pre-departure support, those alumni programs, the post support as well is really going to shape the depth of the experience in country and make it truly meaningful. And finally, I think that programs really need to be values-led. So programs need to be shaped by local priorities in country and also institutional priorities as well. I think that will help to move away from those short-term transactional experiences towards long-term genuine partnerships. So this is going to be building trust, mutual benefit, and ultimately create more meaningful experiences for students and the people that they're engaging with overseas as well. That's me. Thank you very much. I'll now pass back to Faith.
I have some questions for you, Eliza, but just quickly, Josh, given the high impact practice, as George Carr calls these kinds of transformational experiential education experiences for students, how do you reconcile community-focused programs, such as the ones that Eliza's just been talking about? How do you kind of reconcile those programs through NCP with Australia's broader economic and strategic objectives in the Indo-Pacific? How do these grassroots community benefit approaches align with or complement our national economic strategies in the region?
Yeah, thanks, Faith. It's a good question. I mean, I think I see it as quite foundational, because when you're building up those people-to-people links, you're developing those networks of trust and patterns of cooperation, and I think that then in turn can work to support our economic engagement in the region. That's certainly the way I think about it, but Eliza and others might have other perspectives.
Well, back to you, Eliza. How do you work with universities to ensure that the NCP programs create genuine value for students and host communities and align them with Australia's economic strategy?
So much to think about. I think in terms of making sure that they're student aligned, of course, you've got to look at the academic objectives and make sure that's fitting in with the students. Then through a Challenges Abroad lens, we're also doing a lot of work with the in-country communities to identify what the needs actually are. And from there, I think that then creates a bridge for the institutions to work directly together to be designing and delivering these programs for students. Then coming back to that broader lens, I think from my perspective, it's just about kind of keeping up to date with what's happening, thinking about if there's some strategic priorities happening for Australia and DFAT in Fiji. Is that going to mean that there needs to be a stronger focus in that area? And how can we work with those communities and the universities that we're working with to then form programs that align accordingly?
Okay. What trends are you seeing in terms of destinations that students are wanting in program types? Where are students wanting to go?
I'm seeing a lot of sense of adventure kind of coming back into students post-COVID. So I would actually say from a popularity perspective, Nepal is certainly increasing as one of our destination countries of choice. And then Thailand and Cambodia will always remain quite popular. Given their proximity to Australia, often students are tying in independent travel post-program, things like that.
Okay, I've got some more questions, but we'll come back to you. Let's hear from someone who can speak about the career impact of NCP participation. Please welcome Nathan Kench. He's a transport planner at Transport for New South Wales. He graduated from University of Newcastle in 2023 with a Bachelor of Construction Management and has since built over 4 years' experience delivering major infrastructure projects across New South Wales, including the M1 motorway expansion to Raymond Terrace and strategic planning for inland rail. Big jobs, Nathan. Now, Nathan, you represent the kind of outcome the new Colombo Plan aims to achieve: graduates who bring international perspectives, cross-cultural competencies, and global networks to their professional practice in Australia. Can you share your experience with us and the impact that NCP has had on your career?
Yeah, sure, I'd love to. So yeah, I did my Bachelor of Construction Management. I graduated in 2023, and then coming towards the end of my degree, I had an elective which I needed to fulfill as part of my program. And then so this opportunity came up to be able to take a 2.5 week short intensive course in India. And within this course, I was tasked to develop a more sustainable way for Amity University, located in Delhi, a more sustainable way for them to upgrade their university campus. So that involved actually me being a fourth year student at the time, leading some architecture students from second and third year to develop some concept designs for Amity University so that they could look at upgrading the sustainability of their campus. So yeah, it was a 2-week short course, which involved, firstly, the first week of the course involved doing a lot of building tours and getting lectures from academics in the industry, and then also visiting some consultancy firms. That first week covered a lot of modern practices in sustainable development, and then we spent a lot of the second week touring places like Jaipur and Agra, and visiting some temples to look at a lot of ancient practices that are used in sustainable development, and then finally presenting the work that we had come up with.
How was leading an interdisciplinary team in an international context preparing you for your current role in major infrastructure projects?
Yeah, so that was one of the biggest for me at the time as a uni student, just working in a group. That was one of the biggest learning curves for me, coming from more of that project management, construction management background, and then having to work with architecture students. It was a different approach from me, being someone that comes from a perspective where it's all about hitting the requirements that the client gives you. In this case, Amity University setting out the criteria in which they would like to our project to be developed, and then you've got to work in conjunction with architects who love to sort of run off with ideas and come up with all sorts of fancy proposals. So it was a great learning curve to be able to work in a group and try and develop a project that that was sort of an original idea, but also fulfilling the client's requirements at the time. And then also I would add in that developing a project that is very region-based and location-based, rather than coming up with your own research about, say, what happens in Australia, for example, and using our own practices and essentially just copying and pasting it in another country. A big learning curve for me was looking at what are the practices that are used in this particular area and try and adapting a lot of that local knowledge.
Yeah, when we were just in India recently, and the bamboo scaffolding on the sides of buildings was very interesting for me. What challenges did your team face, and how did you approach designing the green strategy for Amity University?
So one of the challenges that we faced was sort of really drilling down into the technicals and finding, say, specific building materials, like you just mentioned, rather than we could easily come up with all the different types of construction methods that we use in Australia, for example, but it was really trying to understand what is used in India, but not only India as itself, certain parts of India, looking at the climate of the area and seeing what's appropriate. Say, for example, bamboo, like you said, that example is more appropriate in the west side of India, and we couldn't just take that building material and replicate it in our project location. So I was really understanding the technicals of what is appropriate for the specific area.
That project seems quite significant for a fourth year student. Nathan, I'm impressed that at the extent on the project that you were working at. If you could go back and do it again, what would you do differently to maximize your experience, if anything?
If I'm being honest, I feel like I maximized my experience, like, for sure. So we were working. So you would essentially, I was there for 2 weeks. We would be essentially doing tours and working in our group projects from about 9 to 5. So that it takes up a lot of your day, but then mornings and night times, I really sort of push myself to get out there and experience the country as much as possible. So I really do think I milked the experience for what I could.
I want to be young again. Nathan, I've
Yeah.
got some more questions, but I'm going to move to Dakota, who's also, she's literally just returned from an experience in India. Um, Dakota has just joined from a study tour to India, and she can give us the most current student perspective on NCP experiences. And Dakota, what motivated you to apply for the India program?
I think I had two sort of reasons for applying. Professionally, I was motivated to apply because I saw the value in the opportunity presented in going over to India to really build and apply key workplace skills in a cross-cultural environment. Obviously, you don't have 100% control over everything, and plans change and language barriers can come up. And I think for me, leading a collaborative project meant navigating different perspectives and cultures with care. And, that professionally for me, I work in First Nations heritage protection within the federal government. And so, developing and really honing those skills of cultural responsiveness, respectful engagement, and adaptive thinking are critical. And then personally, I was motivated to apply for the experience because I wanted to push myself beyond my comfort zone. I think to really understand how other countries are addressing their own developmental challenges and to reflect on how these lessons apply in my own work and life context. And I think it really highlighted my privilege to me in a lot of different areas. Really just deepened my appreciation for the communities that I work with back home as well.
Did you send some photographs through? Did you have a presentation that you wanted to talk through?
I've got a little bit of a presentation. The photos just are kind of photos from the trip. So if you want to share them, that's...
Yeah, I'll bring them up and you tell me when to go to the next.
They don't really relate. I just thought I'd show off our trip, to be honest.
Okay, can you see that now? Oh my God, everything's going on in my screen. I do apologize. I told you I wasn't a very good driver.
Sorry, it wasn't working in PowerPoint. The photos were too good from the university, so.
There we go. Whereabouts is that one? Look at you guys.
Yeah, that's at the Statue of Unity. Which is pretty cool.
You tell me when you want me to move.
All right. I don't think we're at the start, but that's okay. As I said, it's just photos. But anyway, thank you for the opportunity to share my experience today. As Faith mentioned, I just came back from India with Charles Sturt University. So we did a 2-week work integrated learning program in Gujarat, India, with Charles Sturt University and Parole University, which is just outside of Vadodara. And our focus for the 2 weeks was developing a real-world application for a few of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. You can go to the next photo if you want. Thanks. As I said, you'll see some photos on our screen. They're just glimpses of our experience. We did carve out some time, as you can see, for sightseeing as well. You can go to the next one if you want. This summer school program brought together 4 Australian students from Charles Sturt University and a cohort of 15 Indian students from a variety of academic backgrounds. We had social work, management, public health, accounting, and of course, myself doing communications. Together, we spent time in rural and regional villages across Gujarat, working on projects that aligned with a few of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, like I mentioned. Our cohort particularly focused on health, education, gender equality, and clean water and sanitation. You can go to the next one. Cute. One of our most significant contributions was in Ambali village, obviously not pictured here, where we co-designed and delivered a series of health and hygiene education sessions for the local community. These sessions combined skits, games, visual storytelling, and demonstrations of basic hygiene techniques. They were practical, interactive, and shaped with input from both the students and local leaders in the village, which gave us a real hands-on insight to real community engagement work. As I mentioned, like academically for me, the hands-on community work that we did was a powerful extension of what I've been studying in communications and public relations, you know, tailoring messages to specific people, working across languages, and bringing together diverse groups. It really brought the theory of what I'd been learning into practice in a real and meaningful way. For me, one of the big things was that our work over the 2 weeks wasn't just tokenistic or a one-off experience for the village. Before we left, our counterparts at Parole University did promise us that they would be continuing the work in Mbali village and keeping us students in the loop of what's happening. The ongoing work in Mbali will have a focus on building on what we started and tailoring future sessions to meet the community needs. And I think this is a great example of what can happen when learning experiences are grounded in real-world applications. Another one of the most enriching parts for me was the time we spent just with our Indian student cohort. While much of the collaboration happened during structured project work, we also had the opportunities to connect informally, whether it was during travel, shared meals, or sometimes it was during our structured project work time. But these unstructured moments where we could exchange stories, ask questions, and reflect on our academic and cultural differences were incredibly valuable for me. I think they gave a real depth to the experience and helped build friendships that have extended beyond just the program itself. That peer-to-peer learning added a personal layer of global understanding that I think is just as important as formal learning outcomes. This program between Parole University and Charles Sturt, I think really embodied the spirit of strengthening ties between Australia and our overseas cohorts through education, collaboration, and a cultural exchange. As I mentioned, I now have friends from this trip, and so the friendships, partnerships, and ongoing impacts in places like Mbali Village demonstrate how powerful these real-world mobility opportunities can be. So I guess a little shout out is that if there are any students or anyone interested in applying for a program like this, I would absolutely encourage you to apply. The professional development is invaluable, but it's the personal growth and the global perspective, and I think the chance to contribute something meaningfully that stays with you when you come home. So yeah, thank you for the chance to share my experience, and thanks to CSU for making it happen for us.
Oh, thanks, Dakota. You're making my eyes sting. It was truly, honestly, I've never been the academic that goes, but for me, just being part of that experience and seeing the students engage in the projects and see how they related and formed those connections and took care of each other and this Indian cohorts while we were there. Look at me getting emotional. I was just so proud of them and so impressed in the work that they did and the quality of work. And honestly, if I could encourage anybody else to participate in any of these experiences, definitely go. I know it was life-changing for me, and just reading the reflections of the students for assessment. I'm trying very hard to be critical, but I want to go 100%, 100%. So it's just because you see the depth of their reflection and their thinking. And when George Carr talks about those transformations, honestly, I see it coming through. I'll wipe my eyes now. How embarrassing. Does anybody have any questions who are joining us for Josh, Eliza, Nathan, or Dakota? I have a question for you, Dakota. Has experienced your thinking about your career direction and the type of career that you have?
Yeah, I love my job. I love working with First Nations communities. I think it's super important, and I love that our government is having these programs that are more collaborative. I think coming back there, I definitely obviously took skills back to my current role, but I have, don't tell my work, have been looking at if there's opportunities within my department for widening, I think, my impact. I think having more experience overseas and really developing those connections is something that I do want to explore since coming home.
Josh, having heard directly from students who have had an experience like Dakota's, and I have to admit I am biased, does that talk to some of the motivations from the department for these kinds of experiences? I would love to hear your perspective on Dakota's experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dakota, it was just really fantastic to sit here and listen, firsthand your experiences. It's actually not often I get exposed to the firsthand experience from the students. So it was really quite fantastic and enlightening to hear. Absolutely, Faith. That's a big part of the program, and I think sort of where, if you look back to the origins of the program, it was very much designed to encourage students to be going to our Indo-Pacific region. It was to incentivize students to go to the region, to learn more about it, to broaden out our national understanding of the region that we live in, as opposed to, those traditional exchange destinations of North America and Europe. And I think that's where, the program really can rest on its laurels, because there just has been, if you look at student mobility movements across Australia's higher education institutions, you can see through that NCP investment we have had that shift to the region, and that's something the foreign minister herself is quite passionate about, in terms of the next phase of the program, really tightening up our focus to be particularly emphasising programs in India, in key locations in Southeast Asia, and mobility programs in the Pacific. So yeah, it's absolutely foundational to the program. And again, Dakota, fantastic to hear your experience.
Thank you. Esther, you've put a question in the chat. Did you want to come on and ask your question?
Yes, certainly. So University of Newcastle is moving its academic calendar from 2026 so that semesters will align with the trimester dates, which will shorten our summer break and lengthen our winter break. Is that going to affect student body being able to participate in the NCP in any way at all?
Esther, it's a good question. I wouldn't have thought so. I mean, the experiences for the mobility programs will be between 4 and 9 weeks from 2026 onwards. And then there'll be the new semester program for experiences of minimum 10 weeks and then up to 20 weeks for 2 semesters. To be perfectly honest, I'm not sure how that aligns exactly with the trimester model, but that might be something we can talk in a bit more detail about offline.
Excellent.
But as long as you've got those windows of minimum 4 weeks
Mm-hmm.
for mobility programs, that should be manageable.
Lovely.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Andrew has just put a comment that trimesters have made it very difficult for students to participate in mobility programs as the term breaks are shortened. That is a good point, Andrew. We also spend a lot of time teaching now, just saying. Nathan, I'm going to quickly ask you a question. How long has it been since you've been back in Australia and working, and are you still in contact with anybody, any of the connections you made?
Yes, so I graduated I did the new Colombo Plan course in mid 2023, then graduated at the end of 2023. So I've been working full time now for about a year and a half. And so my experience took me to India, where I made some professional but also some personal connections while I was there. And since then, I've already been back to visit twice. So I've made some friends while I was there, and I've seen them a total of 3 times now by doing the course and then going back twice as well.
Oh, see, that's awesome. That's your impact right there, Josh, that you're talking about. Nathan's embodying that, which is fabulous. If I could go back again, Nathan, I absolutely would in a second. Um, Eliza, if I come back to you, if that's all right, um, how do you think what are the most misconceptions students have about international study programs?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think biggest misconceptions it's going to be like we get the common ones like I'm not going to make any friends, I'm going to be missing home too much. So all of those kind of smaller things actually build up as quite to be a big misconception that this might not be a program for me. But I think that Dakota and Nathan, through sharing your experiences with students, um, who are potentially interested, kind of opens their eyes a little bit more to oh wait, this is something I can do. I can make friends. It's not going to matter that I'm missing my dog's birthday or whatever it is, to have these learning abroad experiences. So I think just making sure that the support is going to be there for students and making sure students know that they have that support from in-country teams, from their accompanying faculty member, and from the warm, welcoming community that they're going to be brought into overseas is going to kind of help minimize those misconceptions that this might be too much or I can't handle not having the support of home around me.
Yeah. We're coming up to the end of our session, and while we've got you captured, Josh, is there, I'm putting you on the spot. Do you have any advice for people like myself and other academics joining? Um, when we're putting our application in, I know you said align to the economic strategies, but is there anything else that makes an application stand out to you?
I mean, that's foundational, Faith, but I actually can't, for probity reasons, talk about what's going to be in the 2026 guidelines until they're published, which is just something we're going to have to work through. But when those guidelines are out, very happy to kind of re-engage with you and colleagues on this, because I think you'll see there's going to be very clear links between a program proposal and Australia's economic priorities in the region, and also specific locations where the foreign minister and government wants to see greater investment by universities and students. So I'll just leave it at that for now. I'll just drop a link into the foreign minister's press release into the group chat so people can see that. So that's what's been published just in the last hour, but yeah, certainly there'll be in a couple of weeks once we've got those guidelines out, a lot more detail to share with you and colleagues. Apologies, I can't go into further detail at this point.
Oh, you'd make a great academic. I was trying to ask you what was on the exam, and you did really well. Okay, if there's no other questions for our guests, I will say thank you so much to Josh, Eliza, Nathan, and Dakota for coming in and sharing your time. I've got a lot out of this session. Thank you so much for sharing as much as you could, Josh. But I will hold you, we will get you back when the 2026 session comes out. That's the date. We're booking you in for that one. Thank you so much for your time sharing information about the new Colombo Plan. Honestly, I highly recommend, even if you're not successful, still put an application in or a tour together. Anyway, all the best to everybody. Have a fabulous afternoon, and thank you again for your time.